Today we're jumping into the book of John. John is a little different than the other Gospels, the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It has this different style of writing, and there's stories that are found in John that aren't found into the other three. Well, today we're talking about Abide in Me. The book of John very bluntly puts out there the divinity of Jesus. And like within it, Jesus is just openly talking about that and using the words I am, like the great I am. During the time that John was written, somewhere around 90 CE, give or take 10, 20 years either way. I know it's not very specific, but from what I've read, it's in that range. Also, though, the Jewish temple has been destroyed in 70 CE by the Romans jumping in and taking things over. So this is a time when the Christianity is kind of more like a offshoot of Judaism, and they're just continuing the separation of the two to become their more distinct religions. So during this time there's a lot of division, and there's this importance of speaking about how important Jesus was and removing the doubt that was within that time period. So if we go into 6:51 through 58, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats of this bread will live forever. And the bread that I give for the life of the world is my flesh. The Jews then disputed, Jews being not just the entire population as we know Jews now, but meaning like the Pharisees, the religious elite, the higher up people. So the Jews then disputed, showing that there was a division even during this time that John is writing this. Disputed among themselves, saying, how can this man give us his flesh to eat? Eating flesh is a bit taboo, even for today's standards. So Jesus said to them, very truly I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink of his blood, you have no life in you. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life, and I will raise them up on the last day. For my flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them. Just as a living Father sent me, I live because of the Father, so whoever eats me will live because of me. This is the bread that came down from heaven, not like that which your ancestors ate and they died, but the one who eats this bread will live forever. So this is about going deeper. This is beyond the literal translation of any of these sacramental stories. It's trying to continue to encourage people to stop, think. The deeper that you think, if you're just told something, I think there's a difference between, well, I was just told this, so I just believe it. I just know that. There's a difference between that and experiencing it, living it. And Jesus was one of those individuals who actually acted it out and allowed people to experience it and allowed them to learn it on their own. Because if you force someone into it, you really can't. Like this, we're talking about God's love. We're talking about allowing this to fill your heart, to live it out. You can't just tell somebody about that. You have to really live it out for them. Not like do it for them, but in a way that they can experience it too. So a little bit earlier, at the beginning of chapter 6, is the story of the fish and the loaves of bread and the feeding of the multitudes. And after this has taken place, which in itself is a great example of a sacrifice. Like this little boy took all that he had and he gave it, like this child, this innocence, this everything, and gave it for it to be blessed and to feed all these people. Now, after this has happened, the crowds end up following Jesus, and still they don't quite understand. I don't know if it's a doubt in their mind or it just flew over their head or something. And we've all experienced, I want to say doubt. We've all experienced how do you go deeper into understanding where you're at and what you can do. How can you actually experience this yourself, God's love into your life yourself, and how can you take your experience and then feel the confidence to go out further with it. In my life, like more recently in my life, I've experienced problems with my health, and I have this involuntary movement disorder that really can completely, I guess, just change everything that I had done before 6 years ago. The way I expressed my faith, the way that I experienced it from other people. And now over the course of these 6 years, I've gone through the grieving of who I once was. And, you know, you go through those steps of the anger and the frustration, and it's just so much that you go through. And I still go through it every single day, trying to figure out how do I express my faith in a way that I can share that with others. And I'm just now beginning to understand that what my value and worth still is, and how do I share that with others, my talents and my gifts, kind of re-explore, like I don't have to share them in just one way. There are so many ways that I still can, and that kind of lifts up that doubt and kind of makes it clear about what it means to experience God's love in the midst of doubt. And it just reaffirms to me, like through this whole period of 6 years, the fact that I can finally get to the other side and begin to express my faith out in a little bit more open ways. It just is the beginning of lifting that doubt about my value and worth as an individual or someone that's within this experience of God's love. So back to these individuals who have just had the opportunity to experience God's love directly from Jesus himself. You would think it would have been the most powerful experience you've ever had. It's just a wonderful experience. You think it would have clicked for them that, this was the greatest experience of their life. It was just, I don't even know if it's put in there as like miracle, but just be aware of the blessing that just happened, that you were able to receive from. And so they've crossed back over the Sea of Galilee trying to find Jesus. And they say to him in John 6:25 and through 27, when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" Jesus answered them, "Very truly, I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you." This continues on in John 6:36 or 35 through 36, saying, Jesus said to them, "I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. But I say to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe." Have you ever found yourself in a relationship with whether it be a friend or a more romantic type experience, and whether or not you were the individual receiving or giving, there was this realization that that person or yourself didn't quite understand the love that was being given to them. You kept expecting the physical reward from that relationship. I mean, I've been there. In my early 20s, I had experienced multiple relationships that they weren't good. And I thought at this time, like, oh, this is definitely love. And I want to say like true love, which true love is a fairy tale thing. It is not God's love, right? So I was in these relationships, and this was like a time when I craved love and affection. And I had this understanding that in order to receive that love and affection, I had to give of myself back. I had to do something in order to be allowed to have any love or affection. I want to say right now, that is not true. If you are in one relationship that's like that, whether or not you're the individual that is taking advantage of someone in gains for physical things, no matter what it is, items or the personal body, just stop. Exit that relationship, stop that attitude, and move on. That is not God's love. That is going to be a black hole for you that is never going to be satisfying, just as Jesus was talking about to these individuals that crossed over the sea to find him again. It's like you were just in it for the loaves. You were filled, but you are not going to be continually filled just by that little amount of God's love. You know, it's being able to be satisfied by God's love and trusting that it's going to stay there. Not that you have to continually feed off the other individual or other things, whether it be addictions or other issues. You have to really let it go and start practicing, I guess is the best thing you can do. You got to practice trust and faith in those relationships and your abilities and in those insecurities. This story about abide in Jesus, abide in me, is just, it's something that can really touch home because it is something that's calling you out to be vulnerable. And nobody wants to be vulnerable. Nobody wants to have to deal with or face up to the shames of their life. That's got to be the scariest thing we can do. But before we can accept and trust in God's love, that's exactly what we got to do. We have to know our truths. And I have gone through just a whirlwind of experiences. I was just a roller coaster of my life trying to find those truths that I could hold on to know that they're never going to let me go. And I've had the honor, really, of having relationships with individuals who have provided me with a safe, secure, trusting, loving relationship, friendship, like in marriage. I have like the greatest husband in the world. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to everybody, but it's just relationships that are mutually respectful and trusting and kind. And I would say it can be so scary to enter into those relationships. And hopefully, like for my experience, I've had people on the other end who have been very patient, as I've kind of like, yeah, I'll be close to you, but I got to move back a second and then move close. And like just this bounce back and forth because out of fear that this isn't real. Like this isn't a trusting relationship. And it's just, you know, having those people that are patient and now being on the other side where I can be the patient one and I can have some security and confidence in God's love to know that I can be there for other people in the same way others were there for me is just the most amazing experience ever. So you're reading through here and you could see Jesus doesn't give up on an individual. He keeps letting them know that you're not getting it, you're not believing, but he's not telling them you have 0 more chances at this point. He's not giving up on them. And that is the most beautiful part that I can imagine. Now imagine now that you're standing in front of an individual, and sure, let's make him Jesus. You're standing in front of Jesus, and you say you have this relationship with Jesus, but you ask him for the shirt off his back, or he's willing to give you the shirt off his back. so that you can be clothed. He's willing to give up all the food that he has to make sure you are fed. He's willing to give up the last little tent space or the last little section that can cover you from the weather and provide you shelter for that moment. Also that you can be safe and secure. And what if you keep wanting more from Jesus? And Jesus says, finally, you eat the flesh, you drink the blood. He's saying, I will give you my all to you, if that's what's going to be good enough. And in that relationship, and this idea of abide in me, it's stopping and saying, I am secure. I may feel vulnerable, but I am secure, and I am going to be safe. And finding this appreciation for all that was given. Jesus fought for love. Jesus fought up against the hierarchy of that time, creating these taboo experiences and understandings, and Jesus fought for love. He knew it was worth it. He was love. And it had to be the most powerful thing you could think of. Jesus talked and cured and supported and loved people from every social class. People who were the untouchables. People who weren't even, a part of his people, like his demographic and group. He would have been there for them regardless. And how beautiful is that? That love is that important. Love was that important. That death could not even death could not destroy love. It was going to be there. And I think of all the people in my life, like, what if they passed away? Would then I lose the value that they taught me? I don't think so. The love that they shared with me would just continue on, though it would be horribly painful. About 10 years ago, I laid in bed. I had empty pill bottles next to me, and I had no clue what on earth it was like to trust in God's love. I was at this point that I had trusted in so many other people for love, and it had failed me. And then my brother died. And over the past months before that, I had developed this reconnection and this beautiful relationship with him, and very open and very honest. And it was wonderful. And then he died. And I became even more scared. And I started to doubt even more. And the grief that you go through when somebody dies is just overwhelming. And I laid there. And I had this horrible pressure and this terrifying feeling over me. And I remember in my mind, I called out for God. I was in a point in my life that I was a part of church. I did World Service Corps a couple months prior. I'd been super involved with church. But I wasn't truly connected and 100% trusting of this God's love thing. I was in and out of that relationship. And there I was, calling out for God in my head, and I got a response back. God saying, you need to say my name. And I thought, I'm saying your name right now. I'm talking to you. And God's saying, that's not enough. You need to say it out loud. I need to know you want this. I need to know that you are ready to experience what I'm about to do in your life. And it took all the energy inside of me, all this strength that I had. And I was able to manage out a little whisper, God, And in that instant, that pressure, all that fear and that terror just was gone. It was lifted off me. I felt like I was weightless, and I was able to get up and get the help I needed. And of course, I'm fine. Everything was fine. You know, I was just so numb at that point in my life, needing something to fill me up, something, that everlasting life that, you know, that you can depend on, that you can feel, that you can experience and know that it's there. And it's not going to leave. Jumping in to John 15, 1 through 11, Jesus talks more about abiding in me. In the beginning of 15, he's talking about God is the vine grower, Jesus is the vine, and we are the branches. And allowing God to prune the bits off of our branches that aren't bearing fruit. And that's okay, whether it be a relationship or a piece of physical stuff in your life. You're allowed to have that pruned off. And, you know, it might grow back with God is that God is the foundation of Jesus, the foundation, all that is the foundation of that relationship, and it might blossom and actually be a loving, supporting relationship, and that's great. If not, it's okay. Allow your branch to be healthy, to be strong. But in 15:7, this is what I hold on to. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. I think back to that moment of laying in bed, and I had to say out and call out God's name. And in that moment, that scripture right there really sets in with me, because it's so true. And guess what? You can't say, God, I want $1 million. That would be great. You know, it's everything. I feel like it's so slow going. And it might just be simply patience. Not that patience, so, you know, until you get the $1 million. I don't think it works like that, because you're not asking for that physical thing. Jesus is very much against all that physical stuff. So you're not asking for that. But you get to experience something that is beyond yourself, and it's just an amazing thing to trust in. My husband and I have really gotten all the way down to, what do we believe? And together we know that we believe God is love. And as people argue about Bible verses and what's what, we just say God is love. We're going to try our best to make sure others get to experience that love, because we want people to know, sincerely know, that you are of value and worth, that you are worthy of love, and you are worthy to be loved. So just now I was talking about my own personal experience with suicide. And I wanted to leave a little disclaimer here that if you or someone you love are experiencing or battling through depression that's making you numb, and it's pulling you towards that suicidal type behaviors and tendencies, there are plenty of resources out there to help you or an individual that you love or care for. You can go over here to this website or use this phone number for a suicide hotline. Also, as a person who cares for someone else, there's more than just handing them a phone number that you can do. It can be as little as going to an appointment with them, holding their hand, being there and letting them know that you are present. It can be one of the greatest experiences and ways of showing God's love to an individual who is struggling. One of the most important things to never do, tell them never tell them at all that they are selfish, because someone who is contemplating suicide or battling through those type of destructive behaviors, they're dealing with so much that's beyond the idea of being selfish, and they are struggling. They are far from it. So check out this website or utilize this hotline if needed to find more resources around you to help someone you love.